Okay, we're live. Hello.
Hello,
Hello, I'm Asad, your primary co-host, even though I'm not
I'm
the leader on this
Alex.
one.
Yeah, I'm Alex, your secondary co-host. I am the leader on this one.
And I'm the new one. I am Kieran. I will be your tertiary and least important co-host from now on. I will hopefully be
Wow.
a reoccurring character, but that is to be determined later on. So,
Okay, so Alex, you want to start us off with
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about something recent that popped up again, and that'd be the Republic of Artsakh. Recent conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It flared back up a few weeks ago in late September, and we're going to be talking about the implications for now, the historical basis of it, and what it probably is going to mean for the future.
and you put together the slideshow just tell me when you want me
Yeah,
to hit
for
play.
sure. So right now, obviously, you just see that that is the territory currently being fought over, the territory held by the Republic of Artsakh, a limitedly recognized nation. You can go ahead and click.
All right.
And a little bit closer, just so we can focus in on the current issue. If you click again, it'll fade in the new borders between Armenia,
Oh boy.
Azerbaijan, and the Republic. So basically, the Republic is an Armenian state,
Hmm.
and it is made out of territory in Azerbaijan that voted for independence. Azerbaijan obviously said, no, you don't. And a war broke out over it. And these are kind of the borders that were accepted for now in a
Hmm.
ceasefire.
And
Although,
when was that?
yeah, I'm pulling up my fact sheet. I
Oh
didn't
my
have it
god.
listed.
Don't even have your notes up.
Um, yeah, it was 1994 the ceasefire was signed.
Okay, and then the war began in 1990, right?
I don't have the exact start date listed.
Okay, it was
I know, I'm
1998 to
terrible.
1994. Okay, don't worry. We have a lot of valuable information. Alex's momentary
Yeah.
failure does not reflect on me or Kieran.
okay, we can
Yeah.
edit it out in the back
Yeah,
room
I'm
there.
definitely not editing
definitely.
that out. I'm leaving all of this in. Okay.
Oh no.
So moving on. That was in the 1990s, essentially, and that has been in place for now 26 years.
Yeah.
Basically, status quo.
Yeah. They've been trying constantly to try to negotiate a permanent peace, but kind of similar to the Kosovo Serbia debacle. No side is currently satisfied with where it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Azerbaijan, especially, I feel like most peace deals usually result in Azerbaijan losing territory, which
Hmm.
it technically doesn't even currently have. But still, Azerbaijan is very fed up with the situation, so that's their main motivation between
Hmm.
striking now.
Yeah. They don't really have theoretically, they don't have a lot to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah. So, Kieran, you got anything you want to throw in here?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, from a military standpoint, right? Although Azerbaijan is a larger military, larger manpower pool and stuff, they have actually a pretty tricky strategic situation going on here because, as you can see, there's a very interesting enclave, not only between Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh, but also the actual state of Armenia. Another thing, too, is that as Azerbaijani forces begin to push into Nagorno-Karabakh, it is very likely to kind of devolve into decentralized insurgent warfare, which, as many countries around the world have experienced over, particularly the last century, is very hard to, um, dislodge or kind of institute any meaningful control over the region, which they claim to be, obviously
Hmm.
part of their country. So
Yeah, and that enclave, actually technically it's called an exclave, for I'm sure there's some
yes,
geography
yeah, yeah.
nerd that will bring that up. But it's like 99% Azeri, theoretically.
Yeah, and of course, it's hard to get any accurate numbers in a situation like this because of the fact that obviously, A,
Yeah.
things change, and also B, most countries don't want to report even any decrease in their native population because, especially in regions like the Caucasus,
Hmm.
that instant motivation for a neighboring country to be like, well, maybe I should have that land now.
For sure, for sure.
Do we want to
Uh,
talk a little about the Sorry, do you have a plan for this?
No. What were you?
We could
What
talk a
was?
little bit about the international powers that back
Oh yeah,
each of
for
these nations.
sure. Feel free to click real quick,
All right.
and you see that
Oh,
the
that's
main
pretty sexy.
the main two backers would be, of course, Armenia has Russia, and then Azerbaijan has Turkey.
Hmm.
Armenia has other foreign supporters as well. Obviously, the U.S. has a high Armenian population.
Diaspora. Yeah.
Yeah, diaspora inside of it. Greece has very close relations with Armenia. And yet, all of these nations have taken almost no step really to say they support Armenia. Obviously, the U.S. currently suffers from the fact of president being sick, and Greece having its own issues with Turkey probably doesn't want to stir up trouble right now. And they've kind of just said, "We hope peace can be returned to the region soon." That was their full statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also kind of going further with that, Russia as well hasn't really been doing that much in the current conflict because of the fact that Putin is kind of juggling a lot of balls in the air right now with
He
issues in
is juggling a lot of
Belarus.
balls, yes.
Yeah, a lot of balls up in the air for Putin, and a lot of people are questioning whether or not he actually wants to add another ball in his court with Armenia.
He has too many balls in his hands.
Yeah, but of course, if
You just
he
can't get
pulls
enough.
out now, he's giving up the region to Turkish influence, which of course is growing in the Levant and
Right.
surrounding neighbors.
Yes, yes.
I think the interesting thing is, particularly with this region, right? You have so many different, kind of interests at play, right? So, Turkey has its own interests, but Turkey is also part of NATO, and so the rest of NATO kind of needs Turkey as a strategic asset. The Bosphorus and the entrance to the Black Sea. So it's a very interesting tightrope for those Western European countries and the U.S. and Canada to walk there. Obviously, you have kind of the spillover of the the Cold War in the Arab world and the Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It has various interests at play, and then obviously you have the Russians and some of their other kind of Central Asian ties from the post-Soviet Union era down there. So it's really interesting to kind of see all these intersecting actors kind of come together in this region.
Yeah, and for sure. And going off of that NATO thing, as I said before, a lot of countries that I said, want to support Armenia, but they're tied up in that NATO alliance with Turkey.
Vanuatu.
Oh yeah,
It's pretty important to recognize that Vanuatu is a supporter of the Armenian claim.
Vanuatu has explicitly come out, which is more than can be said for Greece, of course.
Yes, they have started a Lend-Lease program of at least 2, possibly more fishing trawlers.
And laptops.
Half the economy. But I mean, you look at Turkey and NATO, Turkey is already kind of the black sheep of NATO, and especially now with Syria. I don't think many NATO powers, I mean, they have the alliance, but they're all sitting there kind of under their breath saying, we wish you just fall apart.
Turkey is strong by virtue of a lot of their neighbors being very, very weak.
Yeah, exactly. And also just like they kind of lucked out with pulling out of World War One, they kept hold of the Bosphorus Strait, and as Karen said, that's
they hold
huge for NATO.
That was
pretty epic. You just can't risk you can't risk losing that, because if you lose that, then suddenly you can't really help Ukraine or Romania as easily.
Yep.
But now with the U.S. pulled out of Syria, of course, prominently, and it kind of leaves this vacuum for Turkey and Russia to fight over. Yeah. So this becoming just another chess set for them to battle over is almost tragic for the people of the region.
We'll see. We're not entirely sure how much of an interest the U.S. has yet, or if they really care.
That's something we have to be said for much of the West as well, right? Like, we have a couple leaders who are essentially just calling for a ceasefire, but not really picking a side, more or less, right? It seems to mostly just be Turkey and Iran who literally share borders with both of these states that have declared any genuine interest. Although I think we'll get into it later. I think one of the more kind of interesting things to see what happens as it evolves is kind of this discussion about weapon imports in both of these countries from Israel and other states. As well. There's kind of a lot of people are watching how drones and stuff are being used. So yeah, there's a lot to look out for.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
yeah, that's actually a very important thing to kind of talk about. Is like this being a kind of indicative of what warfare is looking like now. I mean, you get to see it's almost like an
Yeah,
opportunity for nations like Russia and Turkey to kind of test out their new toys.
Yeah,
it's literally an Arma 2 campaign.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a proxy war that has been turned
And
into a
we
large,
see Turkey
proving
redirecting.
ground.
Sorry, you go.
No. Yeah,
Slavia.
go ahead. I was done.
Um, we see that Turkey is funneling, Syrian mercenaries, and they're basically taking the brunt of the assault right now. Like, they're basically like, I don't know.
it's a weird. It's
It's
kind of like an
disproportionate to
interesting
their,
play.
yeah.
I
It's an odd move. I think they just view them as so disposable.
it
Yeah,
well even beyond just sending the Syrian mercenaries, just getting involved as bluntly as they have.
Hmm.
Uh, it's such a
Well, Turkey
interesting move.
doesn't have that much to lose by doing that.
Well, that's true, but at
Mhm.
the same time, it's
They're
still
sending their
like
most expendable soldiers. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, they don't have very great relationship, very much of a good relationship with Armenia right now to begin with. So
Yeah, well, and historically, which we'll get into later, but
yeah, of course. And one has to wonder like whether or not Turkey will get further involved. Of course, I highly doubt that,
yeah.
but I'm sure the Armenians are partially worried about that as well.
mhm.
Are we?
If you click onto the
Yes.
next slide,
Oh yeah, great. Very good
that's
graphic.
just a little demonstrative thing of giving weapons into the next country. If you go into the one after that, you kind of see the powers we've been talking about fighting over the region, and I'd like to take
Hmm.
this opportunity to just kind of talk about the people living in the region that themselves, what they kind of have been thinking
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the battles and all that.
Which is probably the most important part,
Yeah, although what's
more than lines on a map.
I mean, yeah, I was going to say clearly, nice borders are much more important than any individual's life and happiness.
yeah,
So,
and I mean just
I mean, you play Hoi 4, so I don't think you can.
yeah, of course. First and foremost, we talk about the pretty colors.
yeah, I mean, don't talk to me about borders and Hoi 4, Mr. Vicky 2 player.
Yeah, the well, I mean, even in the way this story is covered, it's Armenia versus Azerbaijan with backing of Russia and Turkey, and the one name you don't really see popping up is the Republic of
Of
Artsakh.
Artsakh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I mean, if you think about it, they're the ones being attacked right now, and the ones where all the fighting is currently happening. Uh, I was reading an
Mhm.
article where they were talking to citizens who lived there, and the one thing they were talking about is obviously as a not really recognized nation, they struggled a lot economically, but they've been getting money from Armenia, Russia, Iran, and the country was really starting to thrive a bit. Even some of their smaller cities were starting to look very nice and clean, and it's heartbreaking to hear them say that they went from
Mhm.
driving through clean streets to rubble. I mean, the local supermarket gone, hospitals gone.
Yeah, imagine that, you're an Armenian Syrian who's been repatriated, and then you're just thrust right back into conflict.
yeah. I mean, we'll probably throw the links of a couple articles in the description, but if you just take a look at some of these photos of these places that had been shelled, I mean, it's absolutely devastating. I believe another kind of thing that is kind of good to tie in with this particular picture is there's a very intense propaganda war
Oh,
that is
yes.
going on at the same time. Um, you'll notice that the Armenians are very very conscious of letting in international journalists and stuff, where Azerbaijan has been a little more hush hush about it. Armenia has been pretty consistently reporting casualties, um, and Azerbaijan not so much. But it's both militaries are also at the same time releasing random videos of combat footage, some of which has been kind of debunked as having just been test footage for weapon systems that predates the current set of clashes. But if you go online, you can see plenty of combat footage and stuff from these, from these
Like you
warring
can,
parties.
yeah.
But you know, uh, it's being described quite a bit in a lot of mainstream outlets as border clashes and stuff. But if you watch some of the footage of like this massed artillery,
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
bit more than a
it
border
truly
clash.
looks like a more conventional war than a few border posts exchanging gunshots. They're using not only massed tube artillery like traditional weapon systems, but they're using massed rocket artillery. You see airstrikes, drone strikes, etc. So it's like Alex had just mentioned, a lot of these up and coming towns and cities that are finally starting to um, you know, come into themselves a little more, have just been absolutely decimated. Not just infrastructure but like there's going to be brain drain, right? Because you're just because of casualties, you're going to have people fleeing, right? So there's long-lasting economic devastation, even if that is going to kind of be pertinent to that region for a long time, even if the fighting, per se, stopped right now, So
It's it's terrifying. I mean, it's weird too because you look at these as you mentioned the footage of the battling going on, and when you watch it, it looks like it's in like rural areas, but it's all in urban areas. The actual
Yeah.
fighting.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean intentionally so. Armenia and Azerbaijani forces are intentionally shelling cities because they know that that's what causes the other side to want peace is when their land's getting destroyed.
That's a really good point. They're kind of twisting each other's arm to see who kind of breaks first.
Yeah, and I mean, there's already been a hardline stance taken by Azerbaijani PM that we aren't going to talk until Armenia fully pulls out of the region, and I mean that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels eerily similar to all those videos we've seen, or at least I've seen for the past like 9 years coming out of Syria and Iraq and stuff.
And Iraq, yeah, for sure, and Yemen too. People need to talk a little bit more about Saudi intervention there and stuff. But anyways,
move on to the
Definitely a
next
topic
slide.
for a future podcast.
For sure.
Yeah, we can move on to the next slide here.
Oh
and
boy.
This is more about talking about the history of the region. So this image is modern borders, of course, but also Soviet demarcations of different zones. And one thing important to note is labeled number 12 here is the actual Nagorno-Karabakh, which is like almost inaccurately portrayed as what the war is being fought over. Obviously, the Republic of Artsakh is a much larger region than just the one oblast, but there is the original spark of the conflict there.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of in this period, a lot of ethnic cleansing. Obviously, generally, if you hear a story about ethnic cleansing in the Caucasus, it's probably true to some degree. Maybe not in the last like 20 years, but
in the Republic of Artsakh and Nagorno-Karabakh in particular, I mean, there was both indirect and semi-direct ethnic cleansing as well.
I mean, all ethnic cleansing
the war was like late '80s to
in a way
early
direct.
'90s. Well, yes, that's true. But yeah, there was kind of a large flight of ethnic Azeris from the regions that are now the Republic of Artsakh and Nagorno-Karabakh after the 1994 ceasefire, as well as during it, and also the kind of, I don't want to say premeditated, but slightly more direct clearances, I guess, of villages, or at least trying to force these populations to move to an arbitrarily decided border. So
yeah, it's kind of, I have the numbers here ahead of me. 230,000 Armenians and 700,000 Azerbaijani estimated being displaced during the original 1990s conflict, which, I mean, every single one of those people were probably probably their family's been living there for a very long time, and it's just these arbitrary lines drawn up by foreign powers. Oh, I fell on the wrong side.
Or even their own supposed like homelands.
Yeah, and I mean the
Well, not homelands, home
situation in both
countries.
nations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost eerily similar to the Japanese internment camp or the treatment of Japanese
Yeah,
citizens in the U.S.
Yeah,
during World War
definitely.
II, where everyone who is Azerbaijani in Armenia or the Republic of Artsakh
hmm
territories were viewed with suspicion. You're a traitor, and vice versa with the Armenians in Azerbaijan. And I mean, you can't get further from the truth. These people don't have any real interest in it. I'm sure they care more about what happens, on a day to day than what the grand scheme is.
hmm
Yeah, no, I mean, generally speaking, from my understanding, um, most people aren't particularly fond of 155 millimeter artillery shells crashing through the roof of their house, every other day. But maybe there's a couple.
Oh, okay, we're gonna cut that one out. But yeah, and I think we should also talk about the obviously the second significant minority groups in each country, but also the influence of the diaspora in
Yeah,
online agitation.
well, beyond online, I mean, you could
Oh
look at
yeah, yeah.
like it's part of the reason Azerbaijan felt like they couldn't trust the Minsk group is because the U.S. and other countries in that group, they have huge Armenian diaspora. I mean they're definitely influenced by this huge population of people who feel a very strong connection to this country, and they want to see the borders of it expand to what they view as rightful, or to reclaim the land that they were once kicked out of. Um, and yeah, the influence is huge. And like you mentioned, online, the already immediate outpouring of support, even from people who aren't members of the diaspora, just like making memes at the expense of Armenia or Azerbaijan, just
Yeah.
to send
hmm
support.
yeah. I had something, and oh yeah, also, Armenia, of course, had a color revolution 2 years ago, which I think is a significant part of that, of this like resurgence of nationalism and such. It's very hard to feel like strong nationalism for just like, your standard president's been in power for 20 years, you know, at least online in the diaspora. They tend to be more cool towards those kind of regimes. Whereas, if there's some like even an illusion of hope that the home
Yeah,
country might
they'll
do
hop
better.
in.
I mean, I like the new party in power. What's it called? Like New Step Movement, new
Something of that nature.
My Step
I'll pull up the
Alliance,
exact
My
one.
Step Alliance.
Ah, there it is.
It doesn't look very. I mean, they're both backed by business interests. Let's be honest. But at least one promises anti-corruption measures,
One
and that
actually
seems
has
to
the
be
decency to pretend.
yeah, and that seems to be enough for people online to latch
Yeah.
onto it.
Well, of course, they don't have to live with the government anyway. It doesn't matter to them.
Exactly. All they care
Which, of
about, all they
course,
care about is like the change in political names and like the colors and the.
I do want to point out just one thing that we noticed looking back on our last podcast episode is we definitely took a very hardline stance to talk about the diaspora. I'd just like to clarify for all of us here that we aren't trying to say that every diaspora member is some mindless nationalist. I myself am a
Well, I'm
member of
saying that. I don't
the
know about you.
of. I'm not, and I'm sure Kieran, you agree with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I myself am a member of the Macedonian diaspora, and while I am a mindless nationalist, I know that there are plenty others who aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people who bullshit online tend to be a pretty small proportion. I mean, like
Yeah,
most people just live their lives.
yeah. Most
Um,
people don't
I was
really
gonna say,
care.
Most
most
people
people
don't
are
latch their
national,
identity to like a country they've never seen.
Yeah,
right? And I think a lot of nationalists stop being nationalists very quickly when they start getting shot at. So
I mean, I don't see any members of the Armenian diaspora actually moving back. Although that
Yes.
being said,
Well,
there
I
was a
mean here. You mean here
large part.
I'm sure
in
there are
America or in the
volunteers.
Yeah,
West?
there are some members of the Armenian diaspora in America that have been sending tons of money to Artsakh
Yes,
to
that's
help
Yeah,
that's pretty important.
develop it.
That's
And
pretty. I was gonna say I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's also very typical, and we'll probably see
It's
this
very typical of
topic,
diaspora communities. They raise a ton of money.
particularly of the United States.
Yes, yes.
Diaspora communities in the states are ardent funders of
Movements
nationalist
at
groups and in
home.
conflicts like these.
Hmm.
So I'm sure we're going to kind of see that
Going back
motif
hundreds
crop
of
up
years.
in future. Yeah, going back hundreds of years, but I'm sure we're going to see that motif crop up a little more in
Hmm.
other podcasts.
Either it's, let's give money to these Fenian dudes, or it's let's build a mosque that no one's going to use
Yes,
in another suburb.
exactly.
you know, the Armenians have a saying, build a wall, make the diaspora pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that pretty much gets the relationship pretty done pretty well.
Yeah. I guess uh, moving on beyond the past. If you want to move to the next slide, if
Yes.
you guys are comfortable,
Yeah, sure.
talk about the future of the region. So pictured here, we have
Some
the
very
several
pixelated
powers.
images. Yeah.
Yeah, the powers involved in this current conflict, at least based right now, would be Turkey, Russia, Iran. Those are the countries that have shown interest, whereas countries like we've said before, the U.S., Greece, while in the past ardent supporters of Armenia, shockingly silent or not very shockingly silent currently.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, what are you guys thinking right now as we're moving forward? What do you think is going to be the next step?
The next step is pointless war until status quo happens again.
I agree with that, but I think there will be a significant maneuvering on the part of NATO as well as Russia because,
Yeah.
in a very bizarre way, it seems like both Russia and NATO are kind of, with the exception of Turkey, are kind of somewhat aligned actually in at least the. I know there's a number of Western countries that have kind of this indirect support for Armenia, which there's a line that they basically cannot cross to keep Turkey in NATO, right? Which is kind of keeping them fenced in a little bit,
Which
but
is why
there is kind of
Armenians
this
used to
indirect
blow up
support.
buildings in France. Yes.
Yes, but Franco-Armenian relations are a little bit more complex than blowing up a couple of buildings, and there's actually
Okay.
pretty strong ties between the two countries, and
Yes.
as well as French intervention and early recognition of the Armenian genocide and stuff like that. But it's gonna be kind of interesting because I'm wondering if this is going to be a little bit of a return to the kind of thing we saw with the Suez crisis, right? Where in some bizarre twist of fate, you have what are generally opposed sides, right? Instead of the U.S. and USSR, we have NATO and Russia, kind of come to somewhat of a consensus over this issue, and the status quo kind of before and after being the same. But I'm gonna be kind of looking out for that dynamic. It's gonna be very interesting, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be just everything goes back to the way it was. What we're probably going to see is more maneuvering outside of the actual situation. But
for sure.
For the lines that you see on the map, it's probably not going to change that much.
Oh yeah, no, not at all.
The supposed point of it is not going to really alter significantly.
Yeah.
One thing I'm gonna ask you guys is what countries do you think are actually going to come out on top? Because or at least in terms of negotiation, because Turkey and Russia both have historic ties. Turkey's been very vocal in its support of Azerbaijan, whereas Russia has been saying they support Armenia, but they've kind of taken a more limited, support, and they're distracted elsewhere with its multiple ties. But they want to have control over the region. And even Iran, who wants to become a bigger player in the world sphere, is throwing its support behind Armenia. So who do you think is going to negotiate this time?
Also, would you like to go first? Or I could go.
Sorry, I was reading more supplementary material. But I don't know. I would say it's difficult to say right now because I don't think that Russia seems to be a bit tentative. This is really like Turkey seems to be more have a bit more of initiative when it comes to this. So it really could go either way. right now.
Yeah.
What I think we'll see is Turkey and Russia amicably hash out some kind of deal, and then
Hmm.
or maybe not amicably, they hash out some kind of deal, and then
Yeah.
Azerbaijan and Armenia are suddenly are like, wait, we're done now.
Hmm. I kind of agree with that. I think the two definite losers are going to be Armenia and Azerbaijan, because they're going to be the ones shouldering all the financial and human losses of this conflict without any actual changes that either party would want. I feel like Turkey will probably come away, Turkey or Iran come away from this the best because they also have they have the most to gain and the least to lose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I feel like they're the primary players, and the kind of the U.S. and Russia are kind of secondary players, and are debate are at least kind of pacing a little bit around the room per se, thinking about what they want to do. I hmm, I think Turkey is definitely trying to flex its muscle a little bit, right? They're kind of seeing how much they can get away
Yeah,
with
definitely. I mean, they've been doing that for a
while
while.
retaining. Yeah, but it's kind of, yeah, it's just a continuation of the trend of them trying to kind of see how much they can get away with while not making NATO too
They're
angry,
trying to
you
spread
know,
their greasy
and
fingers all across in all the cardinal
yeah, they're
directions.
kebab laden fingers. But I think Iran, to a lesser extent, is kind of on that same trajectory as Turkey, right? Because this is an opportunity for them to
Hmm.
expand their influence. Obviously, they have a um, large population of ethnic Azeris
Yes.
in the northern regions there. Um, but I think, yeah, it's kind of like I said earlier. It's a little bit of a bizarre extension of a couple of intersecting narratives that we've been seeing playing out for a while. The Cold War in the Middle East, issues with Turkey and NATO, as well as issues with Russia in kind of its post-Soviet spheres, right? It's kind of the intersection of all these conflicts. All right. So, but I think Turkey and Iran both have the most to gain and the least to lose in general. So
Hmm.
that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Yeah.
Sorry for rambling.
No,
All
no,
right,
not at all.
Alex, why don't you give your opinion?
I was actually going to just say, in additional occurrences, I think Iran is one of the more interesting players in this. I
Yeah.
think it's not one we consider often. I think usually when we talk about Caucasus and we think of Turkey and Russia, and
Hmm.
so Iran kind of jumping in here and importantly filling the role of Russia, who, as both of you have stated, and I feel like we've stated a couple of times, is taking a step back. The U.S. never really having a super strong force in the region, mostly just saying, okay, here's the lines we drew, and then leaving.
Yeah.
Um, whereas, Russia usually is the one who enforced it. I mean, since the Soviet Union days, they've been enforcing everything that happens. Um, but yeah, Iran hopping in, it's interesting. Iran obviously wants to be a stronger power. They've
Hmm.
also been intervening in Yemen, and they've had a lot to say about things happening in Iraq and Israel. So them jumping in here, it's definitely important.
Yeah.
Uh, I
I
thought
think
I
they're
was
really
gonna
eager to strike a blow against Turkey. Make it obvious
for
that they're
sure.
not invincible. Because I mean, that would, as much as facts matter. Like even a minor
Yeah.
victory against Turkish influence would be really big for Iran
Well, yeah, especially because ever since the Russian
in
Turkey
terms of
split,
morale. Yeah.
because
Sorry.
obviously we've been seeing Turkey move away from NATO and the EU
Hmm.
and towards Russia, and then moving away from Russia and trying to become its own thing.
Hmm.
Uh, I feel like Iran seizing that, like, it throws every region up in the air essentially in that area,
Hmm.
and Iran seizing the initiative and trying to grab some of that influence. It's not surprising, but it's also one of
Hmm.
those things that I don't think a lot of people thought about when it
Yeah,
was
and
happening.
a lot of, I mean, obviously Iran is trying to contest Turkish influence in Syria. So if they can show that, if Turkey conscripts you, or not conscripts technically, if Turkey offers you money to go as a Syrian man to Armenia to just like fight a war that isn't yours, if Iran can show them that, that's just going to get you killed in some pointless conflict, then, they're going to gain significant influence not just in the Caucasus, but in the rest of the Levant as well.
Yeah, exactly. And again, another region where a great power, the U.S., pulls out and leaves it up in the air. It looks like Turkey's got an easy grab and not so fast. And also another area where Russia is kind of, trying to fight Turkey, seemingly losing ground a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Although, of course, it'll be interesting to note that Iran, as taking a stance of liberating people to their rightful ethnic nation state, is going to release all of its Azeri possessions to the proper owner, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm positive that's gonna happen, and all the Kurds
Well,
too.
yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
I think like there used to be on the Wikipedia page for Kurds in Iran. I think like there were like 2 images, and one of those images was just like a Kurdish woman holding an RPG. I think that's how it used to be.
There's always like whenever it comes to those contested like issues like that, it's always the bigger nation will have its diaspora kind of like change the U.S. Wikipedia page.
Yes.
And like I mean you could look at anything like that. Like my favorite is when you look at like Macedonians in neighboring countries, because there's an article for every minority group in every country. All of them are like listed as like Macedonians, and like Bulgaria, Macedonians, and Serbia. For Greece, it's Slavic speakers of northern Greece.
Hell yeah!
Right.
Which I'm not surprised to know that that happens everywhere. One more question I kind of want to pose to you guys is, I know we've been saying that this won't change the status quo when it comes to Artsakh. Do you think there's any chance that this conflict will make more nations recognize it as right now we have nations like Greece, the other unrecognized nations, and Vanuatu, but can we get some other heavy hitters like that to recognize the nation?
I guess I'll go first. I think what you're gonna see more so than recognition of the Artsakh Republic is a kind of a flurry of people who have issues with Turkey recognizing the Armenian genocide on a more official level. I think you're gonna find kind of a more indirect refutation of one side or the other, rather than a direct kind of addressing of the actual problem. Unfortunately, I do wonder though whether or not anybody in the Western world or NATO in particular will ever recognize it just because of Turkey. I suspect not, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on that. But
what I think you'll see is more people in NATO and even just in the UN are going to start like moving away from the official point of view of like, these are the lines, you have to obey the lines, and they're just going to like stop caring almost entirely. Well, maybe not exactly. They're going to start moving away from Azerbaijan and moving to a more neutral standpoint, to where their office is going to be like, well, it is a de facto semi-autonomous territory, but they're not ever going to say it's independent or anything like that.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I do think that maybe no one prominent, but I do think a couple of smaller nations might throw support, and maybe Vanuatu will get some of the other Polynesian states to recognize.
I don't even know if Vanuatu recognizes them. I just know they voted against a UN resolution to like assert that it's part of Azerbaijan.
Oh, okay. I hope that they recognize it. I'm sure someone will like fact check it. Like that one very important Vanuatuan fan will post in the comments, my country would never recognize Artsakh.
I understand. Yeah.
Or maybe they'll be very passionate Armenian.
Actually, maybe people in Vanuatu do play Arma. They do have a lot of laptops.
They love Arma, I'm sure. It's always like games like that always have weird communities. I lack for a better word, weird. Just like very passionately one ethnic group will play it. Like the Russians of CS:GO or the Turkish people of Hoi 4.
Polynesians with milsims.
Exactly. It's just Vanuatu's just flooding the servers of Arma now that it's old.
all 5 of them, yeah. Okay, there's probably at least a couple though. I mean, they have laptops. A lot of them have laptops.
You'll definitely run into one.
They
Although
may
I
be,
do think
yeah.
that we are gonna. I don't doubt that we're gonna get away with saying whatever we want about
Oh
Vanuatu.
yeah.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
I will ask this though: if anyone is listening or watching from Vanuatu, please create your propaganda posters for either side and send them or post them or
In the
something.
Vanuatuan language, which I don't know what that is.
I'm sure it's some variant of Polynesian, but
Yeah, I mean for free for sure. Create. And I guess I'll even open this up to anyone watching who wants to create some sort of propaganda poster for either side. Feel free to send it in.
mhm.
I mean, we all know it, in the end it doesn't matter anyway, and it's just going to end when all the people living in Artsakh are miserable and tired and fed up.
yeah.
So,
And that's
Yeah.
not to say that it doesn't matter for the people that are there, but
but the actual
um,
conflict itself.
yeah, nothing will come of it except for more pain and misery for the people of the region to their detriment, which is very
Yeah.
unfortunate. So
Well,
Um,
all right. I
does
think, yeah.
do you guys have anything else you want to say about the?
Um, yeah, I guess next time. I mean, these two episodes have been a bit down, just because they're
Hopefully, we'll have a little
pretty
more of a
depressing. Of course,
fun,
next time it'll be a bit more lighthearted. We're going to talk about Yugoslav disco.
which
Very important topic.
will be fun.
That will
If
be
you want to
fun.
click to the next slide, it's a good
Oh, okay.
closer. Yeah,
Oh,
just back to the map.
okay. Yeah, I thought it was going to be something funny. I guess this is a joke in itself.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah,
Well,
and also just to add, of course, Kieran, you're joining the podcast now.
yes, yeah,
There was a joke about it earlier, but yeah, Kieran's an official member, and you'll be seeing and hearing more from him. And speaking of that, I'm sure you saw on the channel there's a video I uploaded the day before to about Vardarskan and the insult, and we're going to be making more content like that. I know, Asad, you're working on another video.
I'm working on a project.
Yeah, and Kieran, you have ideas for what you want to put out?
I do. Yeah, I have a couple. Short videos. I'm thinking about putting up a little mini series on a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. So stay tuned. Maybe probably the first video, and then it'll be up in like a couple of weeks, maybe 3 to 4.
And
So-
I know for
we
a fact
never.
that,
Sorry, we never said our name. We're the Baklavva Nation podcast.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm of course I'm planning to make another video in the style of the Vardarskan video, where I'm going to be talking about the history of the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict in a little bit more depth. So if
All right.
the conflict news or this podcast has sparked your interest, feel free to watch that once it comes out.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it.
And other than that, if you care to leave a comment or some thoughts,
No, don't do that.
please feel free to do so.
Don't like or don't
Question mark.
subscribe.
Yeah, don't like, don't subscribe,
Don't share.
don't save the video, don't share. For the love of God, do not copy.
The only form of sharing that we accept is on Pinterest. So or
Google Plus.
the
Google Plus, we gotta
Vanuatu
go real
Reddit.
niche.
Yes, r
Real
slash
niche.
Vanuatu.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
I'm gonna
r/slash
post this to r
Vanuatu
slash
fans.
Vanuatu.
So
All right.
yeah,
Okay,
with
we're done.
that, I
I'm
think we're
gonna
gonna
stop
call it.
recording now.